My name's Zach Goff. I was born in March 15th, 1990. My father was in the Air Force, so I was born at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Moved over multiple places, multiple times during that time. I grew up in England, New Jersey, and then we finally came to Greenville, South Carolina. Graduated from Malden High School and joined the Army shortly after. I was a pretty bad kid growing up, honestly. I skateboarded, I was out getting into mischief most of the time. It wasn't until I was about 16 where I really started to have like aspirations of joining the military and actually doing something with my life after high school. I've got two brothers, a little brother who actually still lives with my parents. He just started working at a Toyota factory that just opened up in Huntsville, Alabama. My older brother, Jason, he is a contractor for the Navy and lives in Tokyo. He also served in the Army. He was a captain. My dad retired from the Air Force. He did 20 years. He retired Master Sergeant. And now he's currently a contractor for the Army at Redstone Arsenal. He actually just got done working on Operation Warp Speed for the Pfizer vaccination for COVID. Out of all the places I lived while my father was in the Air Force, my favorite place growing up was England. We got to go to multiple different locations every single weekend, such as Stonehenge, Buckingham Palace, and really get to explore Europe as a whole. So that was definitely my favorite place to live. I honestly don't remember because I was really young, but I did move from England with a British accent. So, because I went to a British school, so I moved to New Jersey and picked up a little Jersey accent there. So ultimately when I moved to South Carolina, I picked up a little country accent, so I'm kind of a mutt when it comes to that. When I was making the decision to join the military, one of the biggest factors for me was I had a lot of cousins I looked up to, and they were all Marines. And I was planning on joining the Marine Corps. And I couldn't get a guaranteed infantry contract joining the Marines, so when I talked to an Army recruiter, he basically told me I could get that in writing with airborne school and a bonus, so he kind of sold me on that, and I decided to join the Army. When I joined the Army, I joined under the delayed entry program, so I joined right after my junior year. I went to MEPS, signed my contract, and then I had to wait my whole senior year, try really hard to graduate with the help of my mother, and then I left for basic training 2 weeks after graduation. I went to basic training. I got there June 18th, 2008 at Fort Benning, Georgia. I immediately thought I made a really bad decision. Probably the first 2 weeks I was there, it was definitely like jumping into a cold pool. It was not what I expected from seeing in the movies. But as basic training went along, I started to get the sense of camaraderie and started to get a little bit of pride in what I was doing, wearing the uniform. And it kind of grew on me as the time went. So being an infantryman, you always have certain ceremonies that lead up to graduation, such as getting cross rifles after your 12-mile road march, or getting your blue cord when you finally do graduate. So all that achievement, it felt like really built upon me getting ready to go to airborne school and ultimately my first unit. I definitely have a screw up when I was in basic training. After week 9, when you officially graduate basic before you start OSUT, you get I believe it's a 36-hour pass where everybody across Fort Benning is in their dress uniform, and you know that they're on pass and they're a new boot, and they tell you you're not allowed to dress in civilian clothes. Well, our first thing we did when we got out was go to Walmart and get some civilian clothes, and in the line right next to us was our drill sergeant. So we immediately got caught, and that was definitely not the best experience, but it was something to look on later and laugh at. When I was in basic training, I didn't make a whole lot of friends. My bunkmate, this guy, PFC Patton, I'll never forget him because his last name was so memorable. He was someone, we motivated each other going through. He actually died in Afghanistan in 2011. He was with the 101st Airborne. My first unit after airborne school was Fort Hood, Texas, 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Brigade, 2-5 Battalion. I was probably one of the only people in my airborne class that got orders to a non-airborne unit. And I literally went up to the Black Hat at Airborne School and asked them where my unit was because it said Fort Hood. So I was a little discouraged for that, but I wouldn't change it looking back because I had an amazing time at Fort Hood. I got to my unit in the end of November 2008, and immediately upon arrival, I was told we were going to Iraq in a month. So I really didn't get any training. I got assigned as a gunner for my commander's vehicle and the headquarters platoon, and basically I went straight on leave and got ready to deploy to Iraq. When I initially got into my first unit, I got assigned to be a gunner for my company commander, but it ended up being I was just tossed around to wherever I was needed. And so I would go out on patrol with other platoons. I'd go out with the commander, be the RTO. I'd go out with my platoon sergeant. I kind of just went wherever I was needed. But when we got to Camp Buehring, Kuwait, we had no idea where we were going in Iraq. And about a week before we actually went in country, we found out we were going to Sadr City, Iraq, where a lot of my squad leaders and past leaders had already been in 2004, 2005, where 2-5 Battalion actually had something called Black Sunday happen, where they lost about 12 guys in a huge battle in Sadr City. So I could see the fear on their eyes as we got ready to go back in the same place where a lot of them had lost a lot of buddies. So being a new private, I was pretty scared, but I knew I had good leadership going in, so I was ready to go do what my job consisted of. My first deployment was definitely an experience. It was a lot of bad, some good, really good people I met along the way. I'll never forget going into JSS Sadr City, my first night. We went blackout in our MRAPs into the city. Immediately coming into our JSS, we started getting mortared. And I had no idea what was going on. I just heard explosions and I was like, what is happening? And I hear my squad leader telling me to run to the bunkers, so I just followed. On my first deployment in July of 2009, our battalion commander actually got hit by an EFP that blew his legs off. And on that day, the air was completely black. We couldn't get him to the cache any other way but by vehicle. So our entire battalion went on QRF and was tasked with basically just getting cars off the road. That way we could get him to the cache at Bayop. And by the time he got to Germany, he was originally a 250-pound guy who was about 6'3". He weighed 100 pounds because they had to keep cutting up his leg because it kept getting infected. But he ended up living, and only a short 6 months after that, he was in a wheelchair and shook every single soldier in the battalion's hand as we got off the plane from our first deployment. So that showed me what true leadership is and leading by example. And this is coming from a guy from his deployment before this got shot in the neck and still came back and led a battalion and was there for us when we got back. So his name was Lieutenant Colonel Karsher. He actually went on to be the WTU commander in DC. So after that, before he retired, so I have a lot of respect for that man, and that was definitely a highlight of my deployment, was getting my combat patch from him. After my first deployment, I went directly back to Fort Hood. I was that still young PFC who just got home from deployment. I had my combat infantryman badge, my airborne wings. I thought I was a badass. I saw a first sergeant with a maroon beret in the chow hall, and I walked up to him and I said, you know, First Sergeant, I didn't know there was any airborne units at Fort Hood. And he told me that they just started a LURS unit on West Fort Hood, and I asked how I could try out for the unit. Well, he gave me information, and they were actually holding tryouts, and I asked my company commander, and he gave me his blessing, and I went and tried out, and I actually got selected for this unit. Unbeknownst to me, we were already slotted for our second deployment to Iraq, so our division was not letting anyone go that was not on orders, so I got denied and immediately went back into the training schedule to go back to National Training Center and get ready for deployment, start doing our squad level, platoon level, company level training. I did. I actually deployed again with 2-5. I just made sergeant at the beginning of 2011, at the end of 2010, and we deployed back to Iraq in July of 2011. This would be the last deployment to Iraq for the time being. We only spent 7 months in Iraq that time, and we pulled out. We were actually the last battalion to leave Iraq in the end of 2011. Our entire battalion thought we were going home. It was going to be a short-lived deployment, and we got voluntold to stay in Kuwait for an additional 6 months, just in case anything were to pop off in Iraq. So we stayed at Camp Beering for 6 months. So I proceeded to use that time to get in shape. Ran a marathon there in Kuwait, which was a pretty fun time in the middle of the desert. I really used it to get ready for what was next, because I knew I was going to be on orders when I got home. When I got home in 2012, back to Fort Hood, I had orders to Hawaii, and I wasn't to leave for 6 months. My report date was December of 2012. So I went to my company commander, who I had a really good relationship with. I was a promotable E5 at the time. I was waiting to make points. And I asked my company commander and First Sergeant if I could go to school, because my MTO slot as a squad leader was already filled, and I was getting ready to leave. So they actually allowed me to go to school full time. I didn't even report to the unit at that time, and I knocked out probably 40 semester hours in that time in 6 months before I went to Hawaii. Central Texas College, right there on the campus on Fort Hood. Okay. So that actually gave me enough points where I made Staff Sergeant. I actually made it the day I reported to Hawaii. I pinned myself and acted like, you know, I was already a Staff Sergeant coming in. And my platoon sergeant noticed that when I got there. I said, hold up, you just got promoted. But I was really looking forward to Hawaii and being part of 25th Infantry Division. I've heard nothing but good things. My very first team leader from Fort Hood was there. So I knew a few people there when I got there, so I was really excited to get started. Yeah, my experience in Hawaii, I was at Schofield Barracks. I was with 127 Infantry Regiment, 2nd Brigade, 25th ID. This was by far the best unit, I feel like, in the Army. I know a lot of people will probably say that, but it was such a tight-knit unit. Everybody looked out for each other. The training was great, and we got to do things that I feel like most units don't get to do. We were actually slotted to go to Afghanistan when I first got there, and I was thinking to myself, oh, here we go, third deployment immediately after. And another unit took our deployment because we were slotted for something called Pacific Pathways. And I saw guys in tears because they were thinking they were gonna miss one of the last deployments. And that baffled me. I was excited, but to see that guys they had joined to go fight for their country, and to feel like they weren't gonna get that chance, I mean, it upset them, and that was something that kind of stuck with me about that unit. There's something special. When we got scheduled for Pacific Pathways, which was a joint operation between the Korean Army, the Philippines Army, and the Taiwanese Army, it was a 3.5 month, basically island jump is what they called it. I actually stayed back, and I was the Rear D commander for my company, which I gratefully was accepting of that position, because I did not want to go. But we got to do a lot of great things in Hawaii when I was there. I volunteered across the community as a member of the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club. We worked with the JRTC programs at most of the high schools. We did something called a Raider Challenge, where we had 14 different high schools on Schofield Barracks doing a 3-day event where they actually bivouacked, did obstacle courses, PT tests, land navigation, and 9 guys in my platoon actually received the Volunteer Service Medal, which is something you've got to have like 300 something hours of volunteer time for. And we had 10 people in my platoon that had it. So we definitely did a lot of great things while I was there. Sergeant Audie Murphy Club is it's a series of boards that starts off at the battalion level, brigade level, and ultimately division level. It's oversought by the division sergeant major, and it's basically a leadership award. It's only presented to less than 1% of the NCOs across the Army, and it's a award that distinguishes leadership and knowing your soldiers and dealing with community relations and giving back. I was a recipient. I actually serve as the vice president of the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club for 25th ID. As the vice president of the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club for 25th Infantry Division, I was selected to be the NCO to go to the Sergeant Major of the Army Dailies Not in My Squad conference held in DC. It was held for about 20-something different NCOs across the Army, one NCO from each division, and it was a week-long conference in DC where we actually went to the House of Representatives. We went and sat down with senators and talked about different things we wanted to implement across the Army to make it better as a whole. And it was definitely one of the most proudest moments while I served. I actually got to go to the Sergeant Major of the Army's house. His wife cooked his dinner. And I definitely felt important for that portion of my career, and it's something I'll always remember. So after my time at Schofield Barracks, I received orders to Vilseck, Germany, and I had a son from a previous marriage who was living with my parents at the time, and I'd wanted to be closer to home for him. So I decided to see what other options there were, and the only other option at the time was Fort Myers, Virginia, the old guard at Arlington National Cemeteries. So I chose that, thinking it would be the best decision for me. Ultimately, I did not like that decision for myself. Hindsight's 20/20 though, and I wouldn't change it now that I look back at it. The old guard was definitely a different world completely from the infantry side of things I had been doing. Every day was about who can press their dress uniform the best, who can put their medals on the best. I was probably one of 2 NCOs in the entire platoon who had ever deployed. It just wasn't what I had expected. It was definitely a unit that, has great prestige. I mean, they're doing funerals and they're giving loved ones that last moment for their fallen soldier or their veteran that's being buried at Arlington, but it was something that it got the best of me of doing funerals every day. I actually called the 21 gun salute, and at times would have to give the flag to the widow or the last of kin, and it got a little too much for me. I did not enjoy being there. I didn't like the leadership I had there. I never really made any close friends from the moment I got there, so I kind of felt like an outsider. Just wasn't the best experience I had in the Army. Things started to go south for me, honestly, while I was at Schofield Barracks. I just didn't know it. I started to have these periods of depression for no reason. Everything was going great in my life. I had just remarried. I was young and in love, and I would still get these bouts of severe depression where I felt like I couldn't get out of bed. And moving forward, as I went to Fort Myers, I had a bunch of different surgeries on my teeth, on my gums, and I was prescribed pain medication. And dealing with what I know now is being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I was kind of self-medicating with the painkiller prescriptions, and I didn't even realize it until I started to feel withdrawals and sick when I went out to the field. And at that moment, I knew things were about to go downhill for me fast. I started to abuse painkillers daily, and to the fact where I couldn't get out of bed without taking them first thing in the morning. And I was a pretty big guy, bigger built guy than most guys in the unit, and I was starting to drop weight fast. I was getting out of PT, and pills are pretty expensive, so that actually led to heroin use. And that's when I really knew I wasn't going to be able to hide it anymore. I actually got called to my commander's office, asked what was going on. I told my commander and my first sergeant that I had been using. They told me I would get help, and they actually sent me to the ASAP program for our unit, and they got me into inpatient treatment while I was actually during active duty. They definitely gave me every benefit of the doubt. I actually had prescriptions for pain medication, so I couldn't technically pop hot until I got out of inpatient treatment on my first go around and got out and immediately went back to use. And at that point, I wasn't currently on a prescription. So I was actually getting told that I was going to be separated from the Army. And I was going to try to fight it. I was getting letters of recommendation set up, and I don't even know why I was trying to fight it. It's because I was trying to hold on to the career that I had. I viewed myself in the good times, not the times that I was currently going through. And looking back, it was in my best interest to just get out. But I tried to fight it for a period of time, and me and my wife, Emily, had a newborn son, Nathan, who was just about 4 months old. And suddenly he died from something called witness SIDS. And at that point, my life kind of shattered, and I just said, I'll take the discharge and I'll get out. So even though they could have taken more extremes with me getting out, they knew what I was currently going through in my life, and they kind of gave me that compassionate, okay, we'll just let you get out. And looking back, I am glad that they treated me that way. At the time, I thought everybody was treating me bad, but looking back, I know that they did what was best for me at the time. When Nathan died, he was only 4 months old. He was just about to turn 4 months old. Yeah, he died while we were at Fort Myer, literally 3 weeks before I got out of the Army. So that led into an extremely rocky transition. I wasn't ready to deal with everyday life at that time. So I was not ready to deal with a transition from the military that I had been in for 9 years. I had all my stuff packed up from my house. I didn't even set up for it to get delivered anywhere. It's, for all I know, sold at a storage locker auction, years ago. I never even worried about anything. I just literally got in my car and drove from DC to Alabama the day I got out of the Army with it.
Wow. So all your household goods are gone?
It was gone completely, everything. I didn't even have the focus to schedule any of that. I just signed my paperwork and left. When I started abusing the painkillers, I still had it in my head that I was just using this because I was prescribed. And it wasn't until times like I had to go to the field for 2 days and I didn't have access to them, and I would start to feel extremely sick, start to go through withdrawals. And at that point, I had to start using more and more and more, which I couldn't get prescribed that much. So I started buying prescription pills on the streets. Well, I was spending probably close to $600 a day on pills. So that is when a friend told me about heroin and how much cheaper it was. So that's actually how I started using heroin. That was coming from my pay, and Emily actually had a good job at that time. She was making really good money, and I was still spending everything by halfway through the month. I'd be broke. I had actually started using heroin probably in May of 2016, and by August I was already in treatment. I literally was only doing it for 3 to 4 months before everything kind of just went downhill, and that shows you how drastic of a drug that can be. The day I got out of treatment, I immediately used, probably within 2 hours of being out of treatment, I used heroin again. I had just, and I view that time as I knew that my career was over, and I immediately used that as a coping mechanism to deal with everything that was going on. I actually found out during my first inpatient treatment that I made the E7 list on my first look. So I was an E6 promotable who was in rehab for heroin. And that's how I viewed myself. So I had the woe is me factor going on, and it just immediately went back to what I knew could make me feel better at that time. When I got out and moved back to Alabama, I was with my parents. I really had nowhere else to go. My mom wasn't gonna let me be homeless. We had just dealt with the death of our son. I immediately started using the drugs again. I was using all kinds of different drugs, cocaine, heroin, whatever I could get my hands on. My wife actually was using drugs with me the whole time. And we would literally get drugs and go to our son's grave and just sit in the car till 3 in the morning. It was an extremely hard time to deal with. I was at my mom's and dad's for about 2 months before I started stealing money for drugs, just putting my son who lived there around all that chaos, and my mom couldn't handle it anymore. So she told us we had to get out, and we ended up going to live back in Greenville with Emily's dad for the time being, which was also very short-lived. And I ended up actually on the street, living out of my car, still using drugs every day. When I got to Greenville, I had some support coming my way. I had people at the VA like Stacy Reeves. I had Upstate Warrior Solution, all trying to rally to my corner to try to help me. But But at that time in my life, I was in no position where I wanted to get help from anyone. I was still sulking, I was still self-destructing, and I didn't want anything to do with it. And I continued self-destructing until I found myself in a jail cell that August with some pretty severe charges and a whole lot of them. And life kind of flashed before my eyes at that moment. I ended up actually getting out of jail on bond on an ankle monitor after like a month. And within 2 months of being out on bond on an ankle monitor, I had cut my ankle monitor off, was using drugs again, fled the state, tried to go to rehab, got rejected, came home, got rearrested, and I ended up spending 3.5 months in Greenville County before going to court, where the judge sentenced me to 1 year of house arrest and 5 years of probation. I am actually 1 year away from getting off probation, or if I pay my full restitution, I get off before then, which I'm about 2 months away from paying and finishing, so I should be off within the next 2 months. The wake-up call for me was not jail. It was not the sentencing, because I was on house arrest for a year and I drank every single day. I was never even a big drinker, but I drank every day because I needed something to make me feel, outside of my own head. Immediately getting off of house arrest in 2018, I started using drugs right away. That was a short-lived time, but I found myself back in jail, and this time I was reaching out to try to get help, which I still didn't fully accept. Honestly, my wife went to rehab, and it was for the first time in a long time. I was all by myself, and I was so severely depressed. I was using drugs not to get high, not to feel good, but literally to feel like I wasn't going to kill myself. I mean, I was suicidal every single day, and I was begging my mom on the phone to try to figure out how I could get some help, because I thought of a way, but I wasn't allowed to leave the state. And it wasn't for a judge at probation who told me I could choose where I wanted to go. My probation officer wanted me to be court-ordered to a state-run facility and sit in county until a bed was open. And the judge saw my military service, and he told me that I fought for this country and I deserved to go where I chose to. And he gave me a choice, and he said, "What day will you check into the Asheville VA medical facility for their inpatient program?" I told him I'd be there that Sunday, and he told me if I wasn't there that Sunday by midnight, he put a warrant out for my arrest. And
Who was the judge?
I can't remember his name. I really don't. I had never met him until that point. But he shot down my probation officer at every opportunity, and I thought, this guy's got my back. Somebody has my back. And at that point on, I literally told myself, I'm going to put everything I have into this. I know I want to change. And when I went to rehab, it was my third one. It was like I had never been there before, because I went in with a completely different attitude of actually wanting to change my life, actually wanting to make something of myself again, which I thought was impossible. I thought I had burned every bridge I had. The Asheville program is a 28-day program specifically set for vets. It's unlike any other rehab program I've seen. They treat you like an adult. You can have your cell phone there. You can have 4-hour passes 2 weeks in. You can go smoke. They take you on fishing trips. If you want to be there and you want to get help, they give you all the tools for success, but they also give you enough rope to hang yourself with. But for me, that type of program is what I needed. You could have put me in a program that had no walls, nothing. I wouldn't have left. I wanted to be there. But some guys, they're not ready, and that's what I had to learn. Is that 28-day program at Asheville was definitely my lifeline. To this day, my psychiatrist, my doctor, Dr. Weigel, he's still my doctor. I have an appointment with him every month on VVC, and that's because I gained such a good relationship with him. He's someone that I can talk to about any issue I'm having. He helped diagnose me with what I had never known I had, and that was bipolar disorder. And things I didn't understand about myself and how I acted and how I thought I was just a spontaneous dude, but really I was suffering from mania. And he helped me deal with a lot of PTSD issues. I was diagnosed with PTSD as well while I was there. And they helped me set up my disability claim. And when I got back, Stacy Reeves at the Greenville VA, she helped me with all my paperwork, get everything set. And there's so many people in so many different corners for me that helped me through this process. So I'm forever grateful. After my stay at the Asheville treatment program, I came home, and my wife was already living with her dad and stepmom, and we had decided that we were going to basically start fresh, start over, which meant living apart for an extended period of time while we both worked on ourselves. I actually lived with my friend Nick, who I've known since high school. He's been a huge support system for me. I lived with him for 6 months. He got me a job working at Mellow Mushroom Pizza, downtown Greenville. And it was the first job I think really I had since being out of the Army. And it was definitely a humbling experience. But for those 6 months, I just worked on myself. I went through all my appointments. I started working out again. I started figuring out who I was again. Somebody who was not using drugs, who didn't need something to feel like I was somebody else. I started to gain confidence again. I started to go out and volunteer again, go play kickball, different things, activities that put me out of my comfort zone, which ultimately helped me become like the person I am today. And that time period actually helped the relationship with me and my wife really blossom, because I had so much time to work on myself that I had more to give for my family when I actually did move back in together. And we actually found a home in Easley, and we moved in November of 2019, and we've been living there ever since. And got pregnant again, and had another child. So we've got 2 boys that live with us. Asher's 3, and Sammy is 9 months old. So it's definitely a lively home at the moment.
That's awesome. And what's your other son's name?
With my parents?
Yeah, with your parents.
My son Tristan is 9, who lives with my parents, and my parents have been so great in raising him, and they treat him like he's their son, and I appreciate that. One day I would like to ultimately buy a house and get him to come move and live with me. I think he'd benefit from being with his dad, and I know he wants to. He's just waiting on the opportunity. So that's my next big goal moving forward for the year, is to purchase our first home.
Awesome.
One of the biggest things that helped me move on with recovery and ultimately working on myself was going back to school. I decided I wanted to enroll and finish my bachelor's degree, only change my major for psychology with a concentration on addiction, and something that I've experienced firsthand and that potentially in the future I could help people with. I had been working closely with Upstate Warrior Solution, volunteering, and I was really interested in the fellowship program they had. And I was just getting ready. I'd done all my application forms, and I actually got an email from about 3 different people, Charlie Hall, Stacy Reeves, and Robin Grable, all for a job at Favor Greenville for a veteran peer coach. And I immediately did some research on what a peer coach is and how that could be a job for me. And I immediately was interested, and I reached out to Rich Jones, the CEO of Favor Greenville, and I told him I was definitely excited and interested in the job, and he set me up with a job interview the following week. At Favor Greenville, I'm a recovery coach, specifically working in our veteran program. That's a newly formed program that we work closely with organizations within the community to kind of pinpoint veterans that need help with substance use issues and also mental health issues. We receive our veterans from referrals from these organizations and different partners we have, such as Heritage Health, Upstate Warrior Solution, and even the Greenville VA. This is a one-on-one coaching program that we do. It's basically peer-led, peer-driven to work with individuals from where they are at in their recovery. Everyone is at a different place in their life and what they're able to give in the recovery. Just as I said with my own story, I wasn't ready for it until I decided. But as a recovery coach, we're here to help guide the veteran, on what might be some better decisions moving forward for them in their recovery. What I found works best, especially with veterans, is to talk to them like they're one of the guys or gals. Talk about things that we both would know about serving. What was their job? Where are some of the places they were stationed at? Start to gain a formal connection with that veteran before just jumping in and saying like, hey, let's get you an inpatient treatment. You got to gain trust with the individual. You got to gain a rapport, and then move forward on talking about how we can help you, assist you. Because a lot of times people, especially when people are dealing with substance use, they immediately jump to the thought, we've got to figure out how to get this guy to stop drinking, how to stop using drugs. When typically the situations that led them to their use, they could be homeless, they could not know where their next meal is going to be. And we also help figure out how to deal with those life or death type issues immediately. And that's where we can work with different organizations like Upstate Warrior Solution to help find all these different programs to assist. So far, it's still pretty early. Our program is still a baby, but we have had some pretty good success stories. We've got 2 guys that are at their 5-month sober dates. They're getting ready to move back home, move back in with their families and start transitioning. And it's really great to see how the mindset has changed, because if you could see before and after pictures, I imagine how I was. And seeing them, it's the same thing. The healthy look, the gained weight, and a clear head. Just to get them involved too is so important. I think especially in a veteran program like this, is keep them working with veterans moving forward. We actually have a pizza party this upcoming weekend with fellow countrymen to just establish, get veterans together. We're starting an all recovery meeting that's going to be held once a week, specifically for vets to come talk about their issues, substance use issues. Doesn't even have to be about substance use. Mental health problems, dealing with PTSD. Really just working together as vets where we, if you're a veteran and my story has resonated with you and you think you might need help with substance use issues or mental health issues, please reach out to Favorite Greenville. We have a hotline, or you can reach me personally. My phone number is 864-430-1257. We can set you up with a recovery coach. We even have family coaches and can set up interventions and multiple different resources to help you along your recovery journey. If my story has resonated with you and you're a veteran who needs help with substance use issues or mental health issues, or just needs someone to talk, we're here for you at Favorite Greenville. You can reach me at 864-430-1257. Again, that's 864-430-1257. At Favorite Greenville, we gear towards multiple pathways to recovery approach. That means we meet you where you are in your road to recovery and help you with any resources you may need. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my wife, Emily. She's always stood beside me. She's been my rock since I've met her. We've been through a whole lot together, and we're still just as strong as we were in the beginning of our relationship. My second rock is definitely my mother. She has been there for me every step of the way, bonding me out of jail, never giving up on me. My father for teaching me what it takes to be a man of your family. My kids, with their love, they motivate me to be a better man every day. I'd also like to thank all the people that have helped me get to the position I'm in right now and never gave up on me. The Asheville VA, for one, I'm forever indebted to that program, and I hope one day many more vets can get to experience that same type of care that I got. I'd also like to thank Stacy Reeves. She was probably the first person I met in the VA system. And coming out of the active duty sector, I had heard horror stories about the VA. And meeting her, I thought, this is all malarkey. There's no way none of this is true, because if everyone at the VA is like Stacy Reeves, then the VA is in pretty good hands. I'd also like to thank Upstate Warrior Solution, Charlie Hall. We've had some rough edges from the start, but he never gave up on me. Even from meeting him the first time, where I was a complete mess. And here we are, almost 4 years later, and we're in a completely different position. So I'm very thankful for Upstate Warrior Solution. Also thankful for my friend Nick. He took me in when no one else would take me in. I was completely on the street. Had no friends. Everybody had turned their back on me, rightly so. But he always gave me the benefit of the doubt, gave me a second chance. And I'm forever indebted to him for that. I also would like to thank Favorite Greenville for giving me an opportunity to continue the work that I'm doing right now to try to help others that are dealing with the same situation that I have. And hopefully my story can motivate people to make a change and to give back as well when it's their turn. So,
Yeah, big airborne.
Airborne.